has the power to change the world with just 140 characters of hypertext. Everyone in this room has the power to do this. It happened to me. It can happen to you. I encourage you to tweet at Dom during the presentation, and if you have your head down at your phone, I'll assume that's what you're doing. Please do that so we can continue the conversation after this talk. I'd like to tell you the story of Twitter's birth, and then talk a little bit about the best use of Twitter. I'll conclude with a glimpse into the future of social networks as I see it, and then after we're all done, we'll take questions. Twitter is merely the latest installment of the short form, which is actually the oldest form of written word. Think of some older examples: the haiku, the couplet, the salutation, the epitaph, the telegraph. Examples from modern times include the quotation, the headline, the lead sentence, the punchline. Twitter was created as an intersection of three basic principles. The first is simplicity. To me, simplicity is its own reward. I believe you can add value by removing steps from impulse to action. That's what we did when we created Twitter. The second principle that guided our company was constraint. By this I mean constraint of time, of resources, personnel. Constraints enable creativity. They inspire trust. Choose the right constraints and you'll eliminate uncertainty while empowering choice. The third major principle behind the creation of Twitter is what we call craftsmanship. To me, this means something very basic. Only build something that you yourself need to have in this world. Do it for yourself, and you'll notice every flaw and rush to fix it. Craftsmanship means attention to detail and a passion for the experience of using what you've created. It all began in San Francisco, where I live and work. Before Twitter, there were 14 people, including myself, working at a podcasting company called Odeo. Raise your hand if you've ever actually produced a podcast. Great. That was about as many people who were podcasting back in 2006. But many of you probably consumed a podcast. You've listened to one. So you know what I'm talking about. Basically an audio pre-recorded that's almost like a channel of your own. I believe we would all have one of these channels. That was why I joined. I believe firmly in the power of the human voice. This is what we looked like back then. I'll dwell for a little bit on this photo. I'm not in it because I took the photo. But this is how we started each day. There's Jack in the front. And I like his pose because he's the lead engineer on this project. And he's in the middle there, joined by our German contractor, Florian, and then our designer in the opposite complementary pose. And you can almost see the left and right brain working in this photo. What we did was we'd have this standing meeting, and if you want to keep your meetings short, make them stand up. We would do something very simple. We called it Scrum. So if you're an engineer, if you've been doing some development, you recognize the agile methodology. It's something that we use to rapidly iterate on an idea. And I'll name the other people in this photo. You get an idea of what the company was really like. We would take turns taking notes. So there's Tim, our VP of product, and there's Noah, one of our co-founders. There is Tony, who's our director of engineering. There's Biz Stone, sort of sneaking in the back there. You guys know Biz, he's one of the co-founders of Twitter. And there is our lead developer sitting down during a standing meeting. And you'll understand the culture of the company when I tell you his name was Ravel. He was a troublemaker. He's a self-identified anarchist. Good friend of mine, an amazing individual, incredible programmer, definitely a dissenter. My role was head of quality, which meant that I got to break it before the user did. You can think of me as user number 1 at Odeo. Odeo was the finest failure I've ever witnessed. It was, I think, one of the things that distinguishes Silicon Valley from other tech communities is our appreciation for failure. And Odeo was on the brink of failure when we had a brainstorm. We called it a hackathon. Raise your hand if you've heard this word before. Okay, good, great. It's basically an idea contest. Yes, Twitter was a side project born of desperation. With the pressure of competition from Apple and other big companies in the podcasting space, we weren't growing fast enough. We had to reinvent ourselves. We broke up into teams, and Jack and I formed one small team with Florian. And I brought us to the top of this children's slide outside the office, which I thought would be a creative place to start sharing ideas. This is where Jack first hinted at his idea to make it so simple you don't even think about it. You just write. Arguably, people don't think about it. Maybe that's a problem. This is Jack's original sketch, something he drew years before joining Odeo. It looks familiar, so simple. The one text field, the one button, the simple instruction, preset, and the ability to find your friends. This is what we produced based on that design. The one text field, the one button, all of our friends in a row. These basically were the first users of the system. The first 50 or so people were just us, 14, and our friends and family. Brother to Crystal, who is our support engineer, sister to, I believe that's Tony's sister, brother to Jack, Biz, Evan, my wife, Evan's wife, myself, reacting to this new style that we had. It was a revelation. The actual working code for Twitter was developed in under 1 month. Note the shortened form of the word Twitter. That was because the original intent was to fit the entire experience inside a text message. And in the US, short codes are 5 characters. So we thought it would be very memorable if we fit our company name inside 5 characters. But what really happened was that everyone didn't know how to spell it. So we had to add some vowels, which we did very shortly. We used it to connect with each other outside of the office. And it was clear to me from day one that this social network was less about content and more about the human connection. The service kicked off on March 21st, 2006 with a conversation between Jack, the lead developer, and myself, head of quality. It started out with tweet number 35, waiting for Dom to update more. And my reaction was immediate, number 38. Oh, this is going to be addictive. And that observation stands. It might be why I'm here today, to help you tame that addiction. Raise your hand if you feel like you're addicted to Twitter. I'm going to raise my hand really high. I'll share with you a little fact which may make you cringe. If you think you're addicted to Twitter, I have 81 accounts on the system. I'm not embarrassed by this. I've tried every possible voice that you can try: comedic, dramatic, journalistic, poetic. I've tried them all, and I can tell you that there is a multiplicity of styles that can fit inside this tiny space. Perhaps because of its simplicity or that constraint that enables creativity, it is quite addictive. We started out with almost no constraints, and that led to some issues. One issue that cropped up immediately was the privacy factor. We designed it to be open. We built it using open source, and we wanted everyone to be talking out loud in public. This created a little bit of confusion when I, as head of quality, decided it was important for me to follow everyone in the system. And that included Jack's mom. And Jack came to me, he's like, Dom, my mom asked me, who's this guy Dom, and why is he following me? He had to make an explanation, and it was kind of unpleasant. So we put a flag on the system, which allowed the administrators like us to see that a person wanted to be private. And that's the origin of the protected status on Twitter. So you have 2 ways of using it. You can use it in public, or you can choose who follows you. And that's called protected these days. Back then, we called it private. One constraint that was enforced early on was a 140-character limit. This came about because our original vector, as I said, was a text message, and we saw that SMS was about to take off in the States as it had in Europe and in Asia. Of course, text messages are notoriously unreliable. Raise your hand if you've ever had a text message delivered way late or not at all. Keep your hand up if you use it as an excuse, even though you know it was delivered. I've done it. There were these bugs, and there was no limit. Messages would arrive out of order, or sometimes not at all, or much later. And so in February of 2007, Jack wrote a decree that each tweet should be limited to 140 characters to leave room for the username inside that text message. And there was an uproar. People showed up at our door. Imagine if your boss told you you could only write 3 sentences in your next email forevermore. You'd show up at their door and give them more than 3 sentences of your mind. We were getting postcards. We were getting flowers that were wilted. It was disastrous. But Jack's response was immediate, and he wrote a tweet, which is something I quoted earlier on, which is that one could change the world with 140 characters. And that was the day I started writing this book. So if you missed some of the things I'm saying, or if you want some more detail, please be my guest to find this online. It's available in download. It's also available in app form. And I would encourage you to do that, because there's much more than I can say on stage today inside that. Soon after this moment, the team appeared at the annual South by Southwest conference in Texas with a brilliant demonstration of real-time messaging. They stuck plasma screens in the hallways, and you get an idea of how old the story is when I tell you they were actually plasma and not LCD. As people exited the sessions that they were commenting on, perhaps snarkily, perhaps ironically, maybe critically, they would see their own messages, their own words twittering across the screen in a beautiful animation. And imagine yourself critiquing me as I'm giving this speech right now, and then, hello, great, thanks very much, afterwards, ha ha, walk out the door, and there's your face, your message, right next to me. It was a sort of awkward moment for some people. And it was a realization that what we're doing is writing in public. But it was also an incredible demonstration of real-time communication and an understanding of how vital and public the service really was.